Hmm. Ah. If you've ever read from the New Testament, you may have come across a teaching that is somewhat puzzling. Three of the four Gospels relate what the Lord said after a certain encounter with a wealthy ruler.
Verily I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God.
What a striking image, and one with powerful implications. Is Christ saying that heaven is populated only with those who in life were poor and destitute? Well, get enough people together at Sunday school and somebody is bound to give this alternate explanation. Ancient Jerusalem was surrounded by a huge stone wall with heavy gates. During the day, the gates were left open for merchants and travelers to come and go as they pleased, but at night they were shut so that marauders couldn't just storm in and wreak havoc. The only way in or out of the sleeping city was through a certain passageway called the Needle Gate. This entrance was small and narrow, much like the tiny hole of a sewing needle, and only allowed for one person to pass at a time. It was theoretically possible to squeeze a camel through the needle gate, but it would not be easy. One would first have to remove all the baggage and goods from the animal, then coax it to stoop down and crawl through on its knees. Ergo, a rich man still has hope in gaining a mansion in heaven. It just requires him to relinquish his worldly possessions and humble himself before God. There's just one problem. The needle gate is a lie. There's no evidence to suggest that such an entryway existed, or that it was ever named after a sewing implement. It seems this whole idea may have been made up so that prosperous Christians could feel better about themselves. Don't feel bad for believing it, though, because this myth has been around for at least 600 years. But centuries of oral tradition aside, there's no disputing that Jesus was talking about a sewing needle, not some hole in the wall. As for the camel, there may be some wiggle room there. Some scholars suggest that there may have been a mistranslation in the early Bible manuscripts, and that a scribe may have accidentally copied down the wrong letter, unwittingly transforming the Greek word kamilos, meaning camel, into kamilos, an almost identical word meaning cable or hawser, a thick rope used in sailing ships. There are some strong arguments for this ancient typo theory. Most of the 12 disciples were fishermen, so it would make sense for Jesus to use a nautical analogy. They would have used this thick kind of rope every day and known how hard it would be to try to thread it into a tiny pinhole. Jesus had a knack for hyperbole. He scolded the Pharisees for straining at gnats and swallowing camels. He warned his followers against fixating on the mote in their brother's eye when there's a beam in their own. But in these analogies, it's the scale that's absurd. A mote and a beam are both chunks of wood. A gnat and a camel were both prohibited to swallow, it's just that one is commonplace and the other is ludicrously huge. So, threading a needle with a massive sailing rope is a metaphor in keeping with Jesus' style. Some linguists go even further, positing that the ambiguity doesn't just lie in Greek, but in the underlying Semitic languages. Arabic, Aramaic, and Hebrew all have words that can be translated as either camel or hawser, likely because these ropes could be made from camel's hair. The Quran even has a similar passage that is confusing for this reason. Other scholars argue that Jesus really did mean an actual camel. Camels were a common sight in Jerusalem, and they were the largest living thing around, so it would make a good choice to compare to a well-off tycoon. The Talmud uses a similar analogy of an elephant passing through a needle's eye to describe something that could only happen in a dream. So the evidence suggests that Jesus may have been adapting a common Persian saying. Camel or cable, the issue's unsettled. But either way, the proverb means the same. You can't fit it through the eye of a needle. But isn't that the essence of the parable? Going back to the New Testament, we read that the apostles were astonished by what Jesus said. Who then can be saved? Jesus gives the answer.
With man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible.
Nobody, rich or poor, can reach heaven by themselves. It's not that it's really hard and we have to sacrifice and contort ourselves to get there. It's that it's literally impossible, and we all depend on the atoning grace of God. So whoever concocted this hidden gate rumor back in the 15th century or before, it seems they focused so much on the eye of the needle that they miss the point.